We're ready for the start. They're off.
Welcome in, everybody. It's the weekly Express Bet First Call podcast. Typically, you see us on a Friday, but a little busy on Friday this week, Mr. Siegel, with the Breeders' Cup races getting an early start before noon at Keeneland. So we're up a day on the schedule. Nothing like tightening it up when you have to handicap 14 races, right?
Right. I mean, we're ready to go, though. I mean, since the pre-entries came out a week ago yesterday, we've been diving in, watching as much video as we can, because that's really, the key. And then contributing to the Breeders' Cup Wagering Guide, which is really the greatest source that I know of handicapping information for the next couple of days. So definitely get your copy for that. But if you want a little bit more insight, then we've got it here. This is what we're doing. We're not going to do all 14 races, obviously, but we're going to do the ones that we kind of like the best. So let's dive in and then see if we can impart some knowledge.
Right. We've got a couple headliners, of course, on Friday and Saturday in Cave Rock and Flightline. Not a lot of handicapping probably to do in those particular races, Jeff, but a very quick cursory look at the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. 4 to 5 probably on Cave Rock, and he could go lower than that. Blazing Sevens probably the opposition for him to worry about.
I think so, even though he's not the second choice Forte is. But I really like the way Blazing Sevens is been training, and I like the way he's developing, and I like his style, which is to say that he won't be chasing and getting worn out with Cave Rock. So if you're playing an exacta, and if you assume that Cave Rock's going to win, which I think most handicappers will have to concede that he's going to be a very short price, the only way to make money here is to try to locate the second horse, and that to me is Blazing Sevens. So it's a good race. It always leads up to a championship for 2-year-olds, and maybe we'll get some indication as to who our Derby horses will be next year.
2-day daily double, Juvenile to Classic. What do you want to get back on the old Cave Rock to Flightline double?
It's not much.
420?
Maybe a couple of hot dogs or something. I don't know. So. Yeah. But not every race in the sequence is going to offer great gambling opportunities. You have to concede the fact that there are going to be a couple of races, or 2, 3, or 4, that maybe you look at the field and I'd like to beat that favorite, but I don't think I can, type of thing. Right. And that's the way it is to me with Cave Rock and Flightline. And part of this is gambling. Part of it is the sport of thoroughbred racing, and you like to see champions perform, and would love to see Flightline, if he's going to go out a winner or going to go out, let's make it one for the ages. I think we'll all look back in Flightline and have fond memories of him down the road. But he has to go out and prove it the last time, and there's every indication that he's going to do just that.
One good caveat when you bet with First Bet and Express Bet this weekend, all the races at Keeneland, Jeff, will have a $10 money back special. So if your win bet finishes second or third, you'll get a refund in the coming days back into your account up to $10 for what you bet. So even in the races where you have Cave Rock at a short price and you have Flightline at a very short price, those are the races maybe to take a shot at a horse to finish to win on a $10 win bet. If they run second or third, you're going to get your money back. So it gives you a good rooting interest in a race against a heavy favorite. You play a price horse in there. Maybe you'll get something nice back on a win bet. And if you don't, you get a decent chance horse runs second or third, because those aren't two of the deepest fields that we have at the Breeders' Cup. Let's talk about the 8 races that we are going to handicap in earnest on this week's First Call podcast. Here's the schedule. If you're watching along on the video, if you're with us on our audio sources, we'll let you know. It's the Juvenile Fillies and the Juvenile Turf on the Friday Future Stars Friday program, October 4th at Keeneland, that we're going to look at in depth, the Juvenile Fillies and the Juvenile Turf. Then we've got 6 races set up for you on Saturday, where we either have strong opinions or we think they're really good betting races, interesting betting races. We're going to avoid the Jackie's Warrior and the sprint kind of things, what that look like more like tap-in putts, and go for the better handicapping exercises. Filly and Mare Sprint first on the card, then the Dirt Mile, the Filly and Mare Turf, the Mile, the Distaff, and we will wrap up our in-depth handicapping with a look at the turf. So we've got a half hour or so to go through all these differdifferent races. Jeff, let's start with the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. It'll be race number 7 on the Fall Stars, our Future Stars Friday card at Keeneland. I think 7s are kind of wild in here. It's race number 7, Jeff, and I like a horse here named Chop Chop for Brad Cox. Cox has had a great record in the Breeders' Cup. I think he's something like 6 for 28 all time or something like that. 8 for 26 it is. An unbelievable record in the Breeders' Cup for Brad Cox. And so I think he's got Chop Chop off a troubled trip last time. I think she can move forward and coming out of the Alcibiades, be one of the main contenders in here. I thought the winner was getting tired, Wonder Wheel, at the end of the Alcibiades. So for me, it's Chop Chop in the Juvenile Fillies. Give me your thoughts maybe on her and whom you may like.
Well, in that race, I really made in my own mind, a serious case for our Wonder Wheel. Lots of things. She had the inside draw of 14, and she made the lead and got cut that corner into the clubhouse turn. Wasn't pressured early. Everybody else looked like they were either getting fanned out or tangled up. Opened up Wonder Wheel and barely survived. So as much as I liked her, I'm completely off her today in this race because I don't think she can run any better. And I think there are several in that race, including Chop Chop, that will run better. Put it that way. I don't know how strong a race that was. They all kind of finished on a heap, but the buyer number of 81 is solid, if you can believe that. So I would strongly suggest that Chop Chop is a major contender, certainly one that I'm going to use. There is no single that I see, although I am going to gamble at 12-1 on number 8, Atomically. And I know that the Florida form for 2-year-olds maybe not that strong either, but she's a progressive filly who was just purchased privately after that race by Eclipse Thoroughbreds, sharp people, and I do think that she's arrived and doing very well for Todd Pletcher. She looks good galloping here in the morning. I haven't seen her train, that is to say, I haven't seen her breeze, but I have seen her video. And if you get a chance to watch those races, the one that 7/8, the maiden race, she won by 7 on the lead. And then her most recent race in the Florida Bred Stakes, she was fanned out very wide into the clubhouse turn, settled in mid-pack, made this huge mid point of a far turn move and opened up and won at will and earned a good number. Right. And I have to assume she's going to improve. So I'm looking at her from a numbers standpoint and from a trip standpoint and from what I saw visually, and she's better than 12-1. That doesn't mean that she has to win, but I have to use her for sure. And at 12-1, I think there's value there for Atomically now in Todd Pletcher's barn.
If you don't like the Alcibiades race, one of the horses who skipped the Alcibiades, who I think could be interesting in here, Grand Love, 20-1 in the morning line for Steve Asmussen. Here she was back in the Pocahontas Stakes trying to take him on the lead back in September.
The lead as they come for the top of the stretch. Friendly Persuasion up to confront Grand Love. They shoulder to shoulder right off their turn. They brush top of the stretch. They're trying to hang in there. Fun and Feisty continues to roll. And Fun and Feisty over the top and to the front. Shoplifter trying to rally down inside. Grand Love gives way with Friendly Persuasion and Boss Lady Bailey. But it's Fun and Feisty. An off-the-pace winner of the Pocahontas. 3 lengths in the end. Shoplifter was second. Tight for third there, Grand Love or Boss Lady Bailey.
So Grand Love gave way there at a mile and a 16th, but that was off of a 6.5 furlong debut race and then thrown right into the stakes ranks at a mile and a 16th. She wasn't quite ready for it that day. Steve did not throw her back into the mix, into the Alcibiades, instead trained her up to this. I kind of like that. I think she's going to come in fresh. Some of those other horses had more battle tested and bruising kind of prep races coming into this that weren't as easy as we thought with Chocolate Gelato, with Wonder Wheel. So I think a fresh horse at 20-1 in the morning line. She's got speed, as you saw there in the Pocahontas. Now, that race didn't come back strong as Fun and Feisty ran poorly next out in the Alcibiades. But I like the fact that he's bringing a fresh filly in here. I think she's interesting.
One of my favorite handicapping angles, and I, as an owner and as a guy who has managed a lot of horses, will employ, is the 2 sprints in a stretch-out pattern. Now, Atomically had that. She had a maiden race, another maiden race in 7/8, stretched out and won for fun. That's the perfect pattern. Whereas Grand Love had maybe the disadvantage of only having the 1 sprint. Right. And I would have loved for Steve, and that's, sometimes you can't do this. It just doesn't work out in terms of the pattern and the timing. But if Grand Love had another sprint, and then stretched out, I think she would have been a lot fitter and a lot stronger. And being by gun runner, you have to think there's more to give there. And the fact that Steve didn't run her back, but is now training up to the race, the fact that he's even running her in the race
Right.
tells me he's got confidence in her. So, yeah, that's a thing. And I think you're going to see Grand Love, who's now had a month and a half off. I think you're going to see her run better. Now, obviously, this is a tougher field, but if she gets loose in the lead, or at least can lay fairly close and get a good position, I think you're going to see Grand Love outrun her 20-1. If nothing else, I think she can do that.
So 2 double-digit prices for you to look at, and you say, well, geez, one's Pletcher, one's Asmussen, you're not going to get that price. It's the Breeders' Cup, baby. Everybody's got a chance to be a price in these races because all of the big names are out there. You know, you look down the line, you say, okay, well, that's the second Steve, or that's the second Todd, you know, and you got to beat Brad Cox and everybody else who's showing up for these races. So don't be afraid just because it's a big name barn that the price is, oh, the horse is dead on the board, or, you know, we're not going to get that kind of price. You can get a good barn, a great barn at a great price. I mean, Aiden O'Brien won at 73-1 in the mile a couple of years ago at Keeneland, right? I mean, it happens here at the Breeders' Cup. That's why we love betting it so much. Let's go back to our schedule of races that we're going to look at here on the podcast and turn our attentions next to the Juvenile Turf. Jeff, this is going to be race number 10 on the Friday card, the final race on the Future Stars Friday. Silver Knot, the morning line favorite in here for Charlie Appleby. This is a horse who's pretty solidly favored, as low as 6-4 with some of the British books, but 3-1 in the American morning line here. What do you make of the Juvenile Turf and how this race might be bet?
Well, here's the thing. I do think that there's one American that I like. I'll talk about him in a minute, but of the Euros, Silver Knot and Victoria Road. And I went back and watched the video of both horses to try to see if I could separate them. And Silver Knot is good. There's no question about that. I don't think he's great or anything like that. But I know that against this group, he doesn't have to be great. But I think I'll use him. But I think Victoria Road, who is 8-1 in the morning line, as opposed to the 3-1 that Silver Knot is, and I understand why Silver Knot would get play because of Appleby and William Buick and the success they've had. But Victoria Road, I really have been impressed by him, even though it took a while for him to break his maiden. But he is rapidly improving with every start. Broke his maiden, then came back and won a listed stakes at Deauville. Did that by a neck, and he showed some moxie, I thought, in that race. It looked like he was hooked, and he found extra, which I liked. And then in his most recent race, the Prix de Conde at Chantilly, which is a 1.125 race around one turn, but it's still a 1.125. For whatever reason, they changed his style. They took him back, and he had so much to do from the top of the stretch to the wire. And he really accelerated like a Euro is supposed to look like. You know what I'm saying? Quickened very nicely. It was up in time. I think he may have had one horse beat, or maybe nobody beat at the top of the lane, but passed them all. Finished strongly. The time form rating was good, best of his career. By Saxon Warrior and trained by Aiden. 8-1. I think he's better than that. Again, I mean, you got to get trips and you got to get lucky and you got to reproduce your form. But I'm telling you, if Victoria Road runs back to that race in France, he's as good as anything in this race, and he's going to get a price. So I'm going to use the €2. And then I think the best of the Americans is Pax Wallet. I've seen him here in California, in my own backyard. But he's relentless, and he has really trained well as well. I think he's progressing very nicely for Jeff Mullins. 6-1, looks good. He looks good training. He looks good galloping, Jeremy. He's a happy horse. He's got a really good turn of foot. He trains like a good horse, and I think he's the best of the U.S.-based runners.
I know there's some love for Pax Wallop in the Express Bet and First Bet wager guide, so be sure to check out the best bets of handicappers across the first properties, as well as individual race analysis from all the handicappers of the 14 Breeders' Cup races. I know Pax Wallop has a solid backing amongst those handicappers. Check out their picks for all the races inside the wager guide, first.com/guide. I'll put it up on the screen for you there so you can see how it's spelled out. Wager guide up and running now. We've got the artificial intelligence picks from the First Bet app, now included for all 14 Breeders' Cup races. Eddie Olczyk's got his classic analysis, video commentary from all the handicappers for the 14 races, as well as some looks at workouts from XBTV and from on site at Keeneland. So be sure to check out the wager guide. And as we roll on here, Jeff, and look at our next race on the Breeders' Cup program, we're going to turn to Saturday. So we looked at 2 races on the Future Stars Friday program. Let's go to Saturday. And the first one right out of the blocks is the Juvenile or the Filly and Mare Sprint. The Filly and Mare Sprint starts things off, and this is the race I had for the wager guide. Had a lot of fun handicapping it. Didn't have a lot of fun handicapping it last year with a 5-horse field and Gamine at 2-5. What a difference we see this year with a deep field, a defending champion in CC. Goodnight Olive looks fantastic off 5 straight victories. And then there's the filly from Japan. We got a chance to see her on the track in recent mornings from the Breeders' Cup news feed. Let's find her here on my list of races for the Filly and Mare Sprint and give the fans a chance to see for the first time Chain of Love. She's in from Japan. She ran 4th on the Dubai World Cup night, Jeff, and that's probably the best international barometer we might have for her in the Golden Shaheen. That was a pretty good effort. Now, last year, Japan won 2 races on the program. They won the Filly and Mare Turf and the Distaff. So 1 on the dirt, 1 on the turf. Japan looked ready to make a big splash in the Breeders' Cup. Now this year, she's the only one who shows up. I surmise it's a little different trip to Kentucky than it is to the West Coast of the United States from Japan, and maybe weather and different factors going into it. But I'm surprised the Japanese didn't pile on after last year's success.
I mean, you would have thought that they would have taken another crack at it. Some of the runners last year figured. Some of them didn't stop them. Most of them ran well.
Right.
As for Chain of Love, the first thing that I noticed about her is that she's run 23 times, and she's only hit the board on 8 occasions. So 15 off the board finishes. And if she was a quality, mare, she probably would have won more than 3 races in her career by now. She's 20-1, and normally I would have looked at her, but Jeremy, I've got about 8 horses in this race, 8 mares that I would not be surprised if they won. That's how it is. I mean, you could make a case for so many of these that I don't need to be including a horse that I don't even like to begin with. So sorry, fans of the Japanese horses, I'm off this horse today. But, this race is such a good gambling race because you can get really high-quality horses at good prices, and you don't have to pick the winner because as a rolling exotic player, I'm going to spread this race, and I could get a decent price horse home. Even a horse like, I don't know, but I'd like to throw out a horse to you. I want your input on this one, and that's Echo Zulu. I mean, you look at Echo Zulu, she's been beaten a grand total of 1 time in her career. She was a sprinter when she was a young 2-year-old. They stretched her out because that's where the money is. But I'm wondering, as a daughter of gun runner, maybe she is better around 1 turn. She's outside of the field going 7/8, which means she can dictate her own trip. She came back and won the Dogwood, had nothing behind her, but did it the right way. Trained well since. 6-1. I mean, is she a gamble at 6-1? Is she one of several that maybe you have to use?
Yeah, definitely. I think she's definitely in the mix. And the thing about the Filly and Mare Sprint is I don't even think it's arguable. This is the hottest pace of the Breeders' Cup. I don't think there's another race. I mean, when Edgeway and Slammed drew the 1 and 2 holes, they were probably the 2 fastest horses in the race, the first quarter mile. They're both inside. And in a big field of 14, going to be Hot Peppers is really fast early. Brad Cox's filly is really fast early. Lady Rocket, we've talked about her on the podcast over the course of the summer. This is, to me, the fastest pace of any Breeders' Cup race we're going to see. Much faster than the sprint, faster than the turf sprint in terms of numbers of horses who really want to be up there. So that's where the question with Echo Zulu becomes. In a sprint, is she a stalker? Or is she one who has to be in front, right? I mean, her running line suggests she kind of wires everything, right? But in this kind of race, she's run well enough. I mean, she was 3rd in the Kentucky Oaks and ran a long way in that spot. I think she can sit 3rd or 4th or 5th in this race. Let some of those 6 furlong blazers go. And then all of a sudden we realize at the 8th pole that the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint is not the Breeders' Cup Sprint. There's a major difference between a 7/8 race and a 3/4 race. And it's shown up time and time again. The pace setter in the Filly Mare Turf has an absolutely atrocious record. They get blitzed in this race. Like they don't even they finish 8th, 9th, 10th usually.
Right.
The horse who sets the pace in this race. So I think she can. I think Echo Zulu is definitely a factor in here. I think Cece and Goodnight Olive both have the resumes to win this race, the talent to win this race, and the right running styles too. They're kind of similar in running style, right, Jeff? They don't want to be necessarily 1, 2, 3, and they're not dropping out the back end. So they make their trips because of their talent and their tactical speed. But I think Cece and Goodnight Olive are going to kind of be next to each other, 5th, 6th, something like that, going into the far turn. And they kind of come together. And to me, that's the race along with what you're talking about with Echo Zulu. Then from the back of the pack, you got the obligatories and a couple horses. Wesley Ward's filly, Chi-Town Lady, who wants to come from 50 out of it. When's the last time a Wesley Ward horse came from 50 out of it? But she is one of them. But I think this race is going to, it's kind of like one of those flip cards. I mean, at one point, the chiclets on the screen are going to be doing one of those tumbles, where the top 3 are no longer the top 3 and the back 3 are there. So this is really fun. Cece, Goodnight Olive, Echo Zulu, to me, are the 3 most likely winners of this race. And I think they're going to have the right styles. I think Echo Zulu can sit turning back.
Yeah, I think that because she's drawn outside, I would tell Santana, I know you're a speed rider, you want to bust out and go, but here, I want you out there clocking the field. I want you to let them go, drop in, take a hold. We don't know that she can run that way, but we don't know she can't. And basically, she's got a good burst, and I think Echo Zulu is going to. She's going to be in the right spot, I think. Now, whether she, capitalizes on that, I don't know. The horses that you mentioned, the contenders that you mentioned, I agree with. But Wicked Halo is weird to me because she's perfect 1-for-1 at Keeneland, and she's really in good form. Whereas Obligatory, who we know on her best day can be dangerous, her one race at Keeneland was rotten. So I'm a little bit, a little bit leery of that for her. Agreed. But Wicked Halo, I think I'm she's 10-1. I mean, I'm not going to get beat by her if she's 10-1. I would walk out the door if that happens. So I mean, to me, it's a spread race. And really, again, we don't know. I mean, it could be that Goodbye Olive is just so much better, and who knows how good she is. She got beat first time out, and she's won in all of her other races by daylight. She might just be exceptional. We haven't seen her since late August. And again, she's another one of these fillies I haven't seen train. I wish I could have seen her train, and I haven't seen it. I wish I would have had enough ability to, have confidence to say, I just saw her breathe. She looks great. She's the one, but I can't do that. So I got to spread.
Well, I'll make a house backhanded comment, but the Breeders' Cup's at Santa Anita next year. And I think the way that the workouts are covered will be quite a bit better.
Yes,
when we've got them in our backyard.
Promise you that.
Let's go to our next handicapping venture here on the podcast. We're going to skip the turf sprint. Golden Pal may get loose on the lead in there. There's not a lot of speed in the turf sprint. Certainly, you can shuffle it out and figure that one out the way you like. But Jeff and I are going to move next to the Dirt Mile. Dirt Mile is race number 8 on the Saturday card. And, the Mile is race number 8. The Dirt Mile, this is where it gets confusing with 14 races in the Breeders' Cup, Mr. Siegel. Dirt Mile is race number 5, right?
That is correct. That's right.
Yeah, Dirt Mile is race number 5 on the card. We'll get this straight. The one thing about this race is you've got a nice blend of 3-year-olds. You've got some older horses in here. And you really got a rising player in Laurel River, Jeff. Not a lot of folks have known Laurel River on the national stage at all. Came out of a Del Mar allowance, then won the stakes at Del Mar last time sprinting. Laurel River may be better, though, as a miler. The sprint was kind of like will he be sharp enough to beat sprinters turning back? He looks like a 2-turn mile is probably his best game. Your thoughts on Laurel River?
Well, I love where he's drawn because Pipeline, I think, is going to go, and Gun Idol likely show speed. And Laurel River, even though he does show speed, he doesn't have to be in front. And the way he's been training for Bob, I just think that, and again, this was always going to be the game plan. Whereas after he won that win in You're In, there was no real need for him to run back, just train him up. He won off almost a year layoff. He won by 11, so we know he can run well fresh. And he's very sharp. He's very eager. And this work of 59-2 on October 22nd. Was outstanding. It was, and the thing about it was, it almost was like a practice race, an exhibition race. It wasn't planned that way, but it certainly came up. He had a horse chasing him from behind, and then turning into the stretch, he's just kind of going easy, and he's going to pick up a couple of Vladimir Serin horses here, and he doesn't really have any great, feel or interest in having to go by, but he kind of couldn't help himself.
Yeah, right. Like right here, he just says, I got to work.
Yeah, I mean, there's two horses in front of me. I think I'm supposed to go by them, so I will. And he does it and gallops out really well. And he's come back since this work to work terrific as well. So I think what you're going to find is this workout kind of, emulates what the race is going to be. He's going to be sitting behind horses, and he's going to go after him, just like he did in this workout. It was kind of a practice run there. To me, he's an exceptional miler, and this was always going to be the race that he was going to run in. And I think that if you look at this race, the one caveat for me is I honestly don't know how good Cody's Wish is. I mean, I know that, and Mata said, I don't know whether this horse is better around one turn or two turns, but he's by Curlin. Who's to say he's so much better now than he used to be, that two turns?
Right.
This is what he's supposed to love, and he's drawn outside as well. So as much as I like Laurel River, there is no way I'm going to put a ticket in without Cody's Wish on it, because I don't know how good he is. He might turn out to be exceptional too.
You got Cyberknife, the Haskell winner, Arkansas Derby winner, two-time Grade 1 winner amongst the 3-year-old ranks. Brad Cox, I think, made a smart move by not going into the Classic and putting this horse in the dirt mile. He seems to be placed well. But the 9-hole is no picnic on the mile at Keeneland. You had mentioned it on our Tuesday podcast, but they will start the gate quite a bit beyond the start pole where a mile would exactly be. So they're going to get an extra about 70 yards run. That helps some, but it doesn't alleviate everything. We didn't have any dirt miles run at the fall meet this year at Keeneland, which was interesting. And they have only been running dirt miles since 2015 there because of the Breeders' Cup coming. So that was like the experimental time to try it. But the inside 4 post positions are very, very, very effective in these races. So if you're going to take an upset look, I agree that Cody's Wish and Laurel River and Cyberknife are the 3 name and best horses in this race, right? I mean, I think on resume and talent, it's hard to argue they're not the 3 best horses in the race from my standpoint. But the post position, if you're going to get an upset, it's going to be because of the trip. That's what I'm thinking. If there is an upset in here, it's because the good horses didn't get the trip. And a horse I think might be able to do a little bit of something. We talked about him on our long shot in our 2-minute vignettes. Is this guy cutting through the dark? Simplification. He's drawn in post number 2. Luis Saez will have the ride here. And, you talk about matchups. This horse finished ahead behind Cyberknife last time. Cyberknife's 9-2 in the morning line, and Simplification's 15-1. And you don't got to make up much, Jeff. What's ahead? About 2 feet? I mean, it's not it's not that much. He just needs to stretch his neck a little longer this time. But I think Simplification's a horse who's interesting to hit the board. He's one of my long shot players of the weekend.
Well, not only that, but when was the last time he actually ran a mile? Well, that was a very impressive race called the Mucho Macho Man. Now, granted, it was a 1-turn mile,
right?
But I'm not so sure that Simplification, who's been running a mile and 1/8 mile and a quarter, I'm not so sure he won't be more effective or most effective at this distance.
That's what I thought in the Triple Crown races and the post Triple Crown races. Right. Is he's really good up to a point, but these races are too far for him. So cutting a horse like that back, he'll have a more effective finish. So I'm interested. I'm really interested in Simplification.
I want to ask you one other question, because you're Mr. Keeneland as far as I'm concerned. Is again, we talk about the relatively short run into the clubhouse turn, but we have to mention the relatively short run from the top of the stretch to the wire, because they're finishing at the quote-unquote short wire, which is essentially the 16th pole. Does that really make it difficult for the closing types, even though there may be pace? I mean, that's, a lot of these horses going to need that extra 16th of a mile to the wire from the top of the stretch. They're not going to get that.
You got to be turn movers. You do. You've got to make the move on the turn. If you're not, when you straighten out in the mix, you're in trouble. The average winner of a dirt mile race at Keeneland's about a length off the lead after the opening half mile. So you want to be up there fairly close. Not a lot of profiles of deep closers to win there. And if you do win going the mile, you've made a big move on the turn. You kind of make that big express roll on the far turn. And by the time you straighten out, you're a length and a half off of it. And then you can wear a horse down. But that 16-pole finish line does catch up to you quickly. And what I like too, and I think it's part of why those inside posts do well too, is you get there, you make the front, you save the ground into the first turn, right? That's always the benefit of being inside. But then if you're up forwardly placed and you cut that corner on the lead, you've only got to get to the 16th pole. So cutting the corner and the other horses going around is usually worth about another length or so, at least just in geometry. So you just see horses cut that corner in the mile and the 16th races or mile races and survive the finish line. Same finish line they used for the mile and the 16th there at Keeneland. Right. They just positioned the starting gate a little bit different. So, you do not want to be from the clouds. You do not want to be from the clouds in this race. So I'm hoping simplification can kind of be, mid-pack, make the move on the turn, and maybe be in the mix there. But even if there are more brilliant horses in the race, and there are, a horse like that's very effective, second, third, fourth for exotics, and one that you want to be mixing in. Let's go next from the dirt mile to the Filly and Mare Turf. It's the 6th race on the program on Saturday at Keeneland as we review the schedule of races we're doing here in the podcast. Coming up next, Jeff, is the Filly and Mare Turf. This is a race where the local prep was won by In Italian, and she did it on the front end for Chad Brown. Let's go back and take a look how she did it.
In Italian leads off the far turn. Quarter mile to go. Technical analysis. Vigilante's way to the inside. Regal Glory is still 4th on the outside. 1/8 of a mile to go. In Italian leads it by 2. Here comes Regal Glory taking aim, but she's still 2nd. Technical analysis 3rd. In Italian 2-length lead. 16th to go. Regal Glory is 2nd. In Italian, Regal Glory. In Italian in front. In Italian for Joel Rosario to win it. Regal Glory home 2nd. Going to be close for 3rd. Either Princess Grace or Technical Analysis.
Can she do it again with that style in the Filly and Mare Turf? Now, most years, a filly like this coming out of a mile race would not be much of a consideration for the Filly and Mare Turf because that race could be 1.25 miles, 1 mile and 3/8. This year, it's 1 mile and 3/16, so it's less than 1.25 miles. So, can she stretch her speed? That's one of the big questions that we have for this year's Filly and Mare Turf.
Actually, I think she can because in trying to evaluate her form, she's beautifully bred. She's relatively lightly raced, only 8 starts as a 4-year-old. The one race that she ran that to me was somewhat disappointing was the Just a Game at Belmont. But that's kind of like a one-turn mile, and it's got a dog leg. But all of her other races are 2-turn races, and based on pedigree, I mean, there's no way that the mile and 3/16 should be out of her range, for crying out loud. Not to mention the fact that the pace scenario in this race, with a very long run from the starting gate to the clubhouse turn for this distance at Keeneland, even though she's in the 11 hole, it's not bad because she can again pop and go and access. Rosario can access information from the pace, what he sees, and he can adapt to it if he has to. If there's nobody going, he can chirp to her and she can open up. If you see there's going to be pressure from the inside, he just takes the hole and drops over, which I'm sure she can do. She's done that. Yeah. I really think, and based on what I've seen, and she's relatively fresh. She's only this is just her 3rd start since mid-July. Yeah. In Italian is an exceptional race mare. And if she wins this race, she's going to be the champion grass mare unless, something
or like Goddess wins the turf. Yeah.
Right. But In Italian to me is at 7-2 is very solid. I would be very, very surprised if she doesn't run huge. Now you have to deal with the Euros because it's sometimes tough to evaluate. Above the curve, and I think we both like her.
We do.
Her form, she's an American bred daughter of an American pharaoh. She's done all of her running overseas. She's been running on soft ground most of the time. She looks like she's thrilled to be here back home. Yeah. She's one of these, transfers that go out of state for their first couple of years and they want to transfer back home. Right. We've got a player out here at UCLA named Zach Charbonnet who grew up in the Valley and went to Michigan and got homesick, came back, and he's done great. Well, I think Above the Curve might be similar to that. She's going to be thrilled to be back in Kentucky with ground that I think she's going to really enjoy. And her time form numbers are outstanding. I really think as good as In Italian is, and I think she's terrific, Above the Curve scares me to death.
I like that they have the Euro talent, but they go to the American rider, John Velasquez. Anytime I see a shipper, whether it's a stakes on the Naira circuit or around the country or here on Breeders' Cup Day, I love when the experienced American jockeys who know every inch of the course get teamed up with this Euro horsepower. To me, that's the ultimate mesh on Breeders' Cup Day. It's a fantastic draw in the 4-hole. These horses like cover, right? The Europeans like to be covered up by other runners. So she's inside. She's not going to be out in the middle of the course somewhere trying to find her way. I think she's got a big shot here to upset because Nashua is the European of repute, right? She's definitely going to be the favorite in here. She's a 3-year-old filly. But she won the French Oaks earlier in the year. But we mentioned this when we did our 2 minutes long shot podcast. The favorite has lost to Filly and Mare Turf 8 years in a row. So why do you have to take a short price? Nashua certainly has license to win this race, but I think you can find some good horses at better prices.
I agree. I mean, I'm going to use her because she's terrific. I mean, she won the French Oaks. She won the Nassau Goodwood. She's a good to firm type of race mare. She's a daughter of Frankel. John Gosden, who used to really frequent the Breeders' Cup, is now very selective in the horses he brings over, and he brings this one over. So I'm going to trust John and the fact that Nash was probably doing well. But your point well taken that, I mean, why take a short price when you can maybe beat her with a horse that's going to be a better price above the curve? Yeah. And then they all have to beat the home court advantage filly in Italian. So, I mean, I don't really have to go much deeper than that, quite frankly. That's how I see it. And I'm going to, because, some of these races you can spread, and all of a sudden you're thinking $5,000, $10,000. Wait a minute. But this was the race I'm pretty sure I can get by using just 3.
And, experience can be our best weapon as a handicapper. It can also be our worst sometimes when it's a bad experience. But when you think back to Bobby Frankel and the Philly Intercontinental, what a great miler she was. And the question was, can she go the extra distance? Chad Brown, longtime assistant to Bobby Frankel, in Italian looks a lot like Intercontinental on paper. Yeah. And this assignment is a little bit easier for her this year with the mile and 3/16 distance. So if in Italian is going to win a Filly and Mare Turf, this is the year probably for her to do it. It's a course that she loves and we know already. It's a distance that she can probably get, and she's in raging form right now. So in Italian makes for a very interesting case for the Americans. In a Filly and Mare Turf, that simply is Chad Brown versus Europe. That's all we've had, I think, the last 8 years. It's either been Chad or the Europeans. So this is kind of what we're talking about, right? Nobody else needs to apply for the win position in this race.
That's what I think.
All right, let's go back and take a look at the schedule here and see what we've got coming up next on the First Call podcast. Also want to remind you that the Breeders' Cup betting challenge is this weekend, and you can play it online. So if you want to play in the high roller tournament, the Breeders' Cup betting challenge, go to expressbet.com, check out the tournament section, and see how you can get involved without having to leave your home. You can play from the comforts of home in the biggest handicapping contest of the late season, the Breeders' Cup betting challenge. Also, the $20,000 November sweepstakes is rolling on at First Bet and Express Bet. That means every bet you make in November puts you in line for drawings for $20,000 in betting vouchers, including a grand prize of $1,000. So all you got to do is bet, and that puts you in for entries with First Bet and Express Bet. Jeff, next up, we go from the Filly and Mare Turf to the Mile. The Mile is a race where the Europeans have had success, of course, and the Americans have had a little bit more success. It's one of those kind of misnomers that everybody thinks every year that the Breeders' Cup Mile on turf is just a European-dominated race. They've had success here, but the Americans have actually won more times. Now, the last time we were at Keeneland in 2020, it was Order of Australia, 73-1. Part of that was coming off the also eligible list, a rare scratch in, but the form wasn't great for Aidan O'Brien's runner that year either. Are we in for a more formful Mile this year? Are we in for chaos? Is it Europeans? Are the Americans going to hold on? Give us your thought on the Mile.
One thing about this race this year is that there are going to be some really, really good milers that are going to be big prices. Doesn't mean they're going to win, but if you're looking at the form, and I mentioned on my long shot play, Pogo number 1, you look at his form and you say, all right, he's 20-1. And here's a horse that is coming off a nice Group 2 win at Newmarket, going 7/8. He's got the rail. You got to think he's going to show speed. when he's the kind of horse, if you look at his form very closely, you'll notice that when you look at the lead, prominent, made all, when he gets his front running trip, man, he turns into a tough horse to get by.
Right.
Not as effective in a stalking role. And we see this a lot. I mean, I think you might make the same case for Smooth Like Straight, where give him the front end and he's tough. And if he sits second or third, maybe not so much. Mm-hmm. So I don't know whether Pogo is going to be able to get the kind of front running trip that he requires. But from the rail, I'm sure the strategy is to send him out of there from the rail, make the running, and make them disrespect you long enough that maybe you steal the race. So I'm absolutely going to gamble on number 1 Pogo, but he might be done by the far turn, which is why this is not a single for me, because I can there's so many different scenarios in this race that will allow a particular type of horse to win at a big price. I'm not going to, if I'm playing a pick 6 or whatever it is, I better not get beat by this race, because there's no reason not to spread, because anything can happen. And I'm gambling on Pogo, but boy, I'm using about 6 or 8, maybe more than that if I can afford it.
Let's let the fans see Pogo for themselves, because this is a horse you may not know much about. On the screen here, go to the far left to the rail. On the lead, it's Pogo. And like Jeff said, let him go, and he gets pretty tough.
Pogo rolls on then, on the far side rail with Misty Grey, Purple Pay. Now stand side, Sacred tries to come with her run. Jumbie still there with every chance too. Pogo on the far side running rail. Sacred now starting to erode that deficit, but Pogo's as tough as you like, in great form. Brings up the 150 for William Buick this year. Pogo beats Sacred and Misty Grey.
Now, this is an older horse, Pogo. He's getting to the Breeders' Cup late in his career. We haven't seen horses over 6 have a lot of success in the Breeders' Cup. So we'll see what the elder statesman can do in here. Also from Europe is the likely favorite or co-favorite, maybe. I mean, Modern Games and Kinross are 2 horses they're going to vie for favoritism in here. People have seen Modern Games. We saw him in the Juvenile. We saw him in the Woodbine Mile. Kinross is going to be the champion sprinter this year in Europe, and a lot of folks may not have seen him, Jeff. Let's see him from a couple weeks ago at the Kipco British Champion Sprint, another winning performance.
As Kinross now takes it up on the center in the center group. Kinross sent ahead 2 lengths to Creative Force and Run to Freedom. Far side Tenebrism and Rohan finishing well, but Kinross in the form of his life going to follow up his foray win, and Kinross wins easily.
Now, that's a straightaway race, but this horse has won every which way you could turn. He's got left-hand wins, right-hand wins, straightaway wins. There's not a lot of holes in the game of Kinross other than the season, right? It took on almost all the best races in Europe in the sprint ranks. Is this an afterthought, or is this an exclamation point kind of race for horses like this at the point of their British season?
Well, from what I read, this is not an afterthought. This was a race they were always going to be pointing to, regardless of what happened at Ascot 3 weeks ago. My issue with him isn't even the distance. These middle distance 7/8 type horses in Europe, they all can get a mile here. My issue with Kinross is the draw. I just don't know what kind of trip he's going to be. Now if he'd drawn in like in the 3 or 4 hole, then that $200 that I might, deposit, that might have gone right to Kinross. Kinross actually beat Pogo. We mentioned Pogo 2 races back, and Pogo was beating Kinross. So one's going to be 9-2 from the 13 hole, the other one's 20-1 from the rail. But Kinross is a better horse. If you could let me bet going into the clubhouse turn, I might be more confident than that. So Kinross is no longer a single to me, but he's a must use, because I think he's a really top horse. And again, his time form ratings in the low 120s is good enough to win a Breeders' Cup mile. And so he's one that I have to use with Pogo. Modern Games, I was so disappointed in his last race, even though he ran second in the group run with Baid behind him. You talk about a tough crowd. That's me with Modern Games. But he broke running, and he was sitting third, and he was just galloping along, and then he was asked to quicken. There was nothing to quicken with. He ran second. He just kind of was grinding at the end. He wasn't really moving. The jock said he hated the ground, which, okay, I'll live with that. But he run well on soft ground before, so I don't know why he hated this soft ground and not others. I don't know whether that's an excuse that I can buy or not. But again, I know how good Modern Games is, but he's had now 2 relatively hard races, and I'm not sure if this third race off this sequence is going to be at his best, since he seemed to react to his Woodbine Mile race in his last start when I thought he was flat, So anyway, and by the way, one other thing about that last race, Group 1 race with Baid behind you, it only got a 1:18 time form rating. So what I'm reading from time form is, yeah, he ran second, but he didn't run that good. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So that's why, again, Modern Games, if he was coming into this race off his Woodbine win, I'd be all over him. But now I'm not so sure.
I don't think there's a better gambling race on the entire 2 days than the mile. This, we talked about the Filly and Mare Sprint clearly had the defined fastest pace of the Breeders' Cup. Mm-hmm. This looks like the race that has the most best options. I mean, there are a lot of good options in here. We didn't talk about domestic spending coming off the year layoff for Chad Brown. We didn't talk about Annapolis, who just won the local Grade 1 prep here, the Keeneland Turf Mile in the fall. We didn't mention Ivar. We didn't talk about the Filly Regal Glory. Jeff, this is a fantastic gambling race. Shame on anybody who takes a 3-1 shot in this spot. Shame.
That's what I would do. I mean, even Dreamloper, the Irish bred filly, all she did was win a Group 1 at Longchamp in early September, and did so with a 1:23 time form rating in that race, which is better than anything in the race. We haven't even mentioned her, a 5-year-old mare. So really, again, this is a kind of race where you better spread, because whoever wins it, why didn't I use that horse? I mean, I could have used it. Why didn't I? That's the kind of race it is. But you're right about this, Jeremy. You don't need a 3-1 shot in this race. This is the race. Like I say, I put a 20-1 shot on top, but you don't need to take short prices in this race, because there are so many of these that are capable of winning. If you're looking for an exacta, trifecta, super, whatever you're playing, you're going to have to get lucky. But if you're playing a rolling exotic, this is the race to spread, because you don't have to be. You're going to get a price home here that's going to figure a lot shorter than maybe it will be.
And I've had a lot of luck with the 3-year-old French fillies in this race over the years. This is one of my angles that I love. I'm just going to drop the name Malavat. Malavat. Not Malafat.
Malavat. Right.
Malavat in this spot is not without chance either at 15-1. This is
not at all.
Fantastic addition.
Second to Kinross and the Prix de la Forêt at Longchamp on Arc Day. What's wrong with that race? She couldn't win this,
Yeah. And if Annapolis wins, we get to play our favorite Capital One commercial back next Tuesday.
Yeah, right.
We get together
Annapolis.
It's official.
Indianapolis.
That's it. Come on, Chuck. We're going to see if Annapolis can pull it off in the Lexington, as we joked a couple weeks ago. Right. Let's go to the Distaff, the Breeders' Cup Distaff, next up on the program that we're going to handicap. It's also next to the mile on the sequence, race number 9. We've got a field of 8 in here, Jeff, with very little fluff. I mean, Awake at Midnight's overmatched in here, but beyond that, a lot of people could make a case for Blue Stripe to run well, second longest shot on the board. Third longest shot in the board's the Kentucky Oaks winner, Secret Oath. This is a very, very good Distaff. It may not have the numbers for a 12, 14 horse field to get deep into the tries and supers in this race, but this is a great win and exacta betting race, and one that you really have to do some work on to get through the multi-race bets, because a lot of times these shorter fields, 8 at the Breeders' Cup's a shorter field, is where you want to kind of cinch in, right? You don't want to be 5 deep in an 8-horse field when you're playing pick 6, pick 5, pick 4. But you might need to be in this spot. There are 3 or 4 that are just, boy, I would feel horrible leaving this one out.
Well, I'm gonna just use 3 because you look at Malathat and you look at her ability on this track and her recent workouts and her recent races, and you say to yourself, she's undefeated at Keeneland. She just won the Spinster by 5. She's got the rail. She's gonna just draft into a great spot, ground saving trip. You have to use her. You have to use Nest. Who's to say that Nest can't win? These 2 fillies are inseparable in the morning. It's in the dark. You probably couldn't separate them if it was in broad sunlight. They're
Malafat's on the inside, Nest on the outside in this.
Yeah, and you tell me. I mean, you can't really say one's better than the other, and on form you really can't say it. You can say, well, Nest maybe is a little better, but maybe the form that Malathat is in right now is better than she's ever been. I mean, they're both daughters of Curlin. They're both going to get better. I mean, Ness looks great, but Malathat says, I know that you're our little sister here. Not. I mean, technically not, but little stablemate. And I'm not letting you by. I mean,
look at him physically. Look at the robustness of the inside to the outside. Right. I mean, they're just different builds of horses, but Malathat is a battleship. She really is, and she runs like it too in the races, right? We always talk about Malathat and say she's not super brilliant, that she just kind of grinds you away. But with that physique and that body, she just kind of keeps coming and keeps coming. But even against an athletic and nimble 3-year-old younger horse there, she looked good in the morning. And boy, I think Malathat is going to be really tough in here. How about the Malathat double in the 8th and 9th?
I'll have at least $2 on it. I can tell you that. But one thing about that workout, you notice that Malathat was in the inside. Mm-hmm. She's really good on the rail. She loves going on the rail. And so I think that if she just sits on the rail, I think you're going to see something like that. Now, we mentioned those two horses, but it's always good to listen to an expert handicapper. Sometimes they come up with something that maybe you didn't consider. You didn't take full advantage of the form. And I listened to Jeremy on this one because I know he likes Society. I'm not going to steal his thunder. Other than the fact that because Jeremy liked this filly, gun runner filly, I went back and gave her a closer look than maybe I should have. And the only one thing that I want to point out, and Jeremy will take it from here, is that she's won 5 out of 6. And the only loss came when she went to her nose at the start, was completely eliminated in the Coaching Club American Oaks. He draw a line through that. All of a sudden, she's undefeated. She's speed. She's a gun runner. And now, instead of being 6-1, now she's 2-1. What do you think, Jeremy?
Look, I think she's going to be very tough on the front end. I don't see a lot of early speed in this race. Malathat has gone to the front end races where it suggested she should. When there was no other speed, they were going longer. Just get out there and grind the pace, right? Like kind of what you want to do in the Belmont. She's not going to be on the same speed plane, I don't think, as this filly. I think Society from the outside, it's beautiful because if she has a little stumble or anything, Jeff, she's outside and she's not going to get stepped on by somebody else or pinched and shuffled. She probably loses. Then they've got a decent run into the first turn in 1 1/8. She kind of then can kind of quarter horse get over. And I think even if she stumbles a little bit, she has a reasonable chance of still making the lead in this race. That would certainly compromise her chances. But if she gets away clean, I think she's just lone speed in here. Asmussen's had success in this race in the past with fillies like Untappable. He's been on the board. He's had success with 3-year-old fillies in this race. The Cotillion has been a good prep for the Distaff historically. The Cotillion's one of those good races that it's a shorter distance, and you're not taking on some of the heavyweight older horses. So you're not laying it on the ground in the Cotillion. And she certainly didn't. She blew that field away. And I'll be honest with you, going into the Cotillion, we both talked about it. We said, where the heck did that come from, right? That was an unbelievable, out of nowhere, great performance. She just might be getting good. And Steve gave her the rest in between, didn't force her back into an October prep. She comes in fresher than some of these other horses that ran, say, maybe in the Beldame or the Spinster. There's a lot to like there. I think Society is the horse to beat in the Distaff, not only just a pace advantage. I think she is going to be the one to beat, and I think Malathat is going to run the race of her life. I think it's these two, and I think it's going to get very close at the end. I mean, this is one where I see those two to the finish, and that's not to say Nest is going the wrong direction. I mean, she's just done everything asked of her this year. She won by 8 in the Ashland earlier this season at Keeneland, so we know she likes the track there. Society broke her maiden at Keeneland as well, so she's won over the track. Malathat's won 3 of the biggest races at Keeneland. I mean, she's got a resume matched only by Take Charge Lady probably in the history of mares at Keeneland to win the Spinster, the Ashland, and the Double Dog Dare. I mean, that's gold plate material. They give away trays and plates for good things. She's earned a tray at Keeneland for winning those 3 races. And this is going to be a fantastic renewal of the Distaff, but I am really bullish on Society. And I know that it's going to take an unbelievable performance to beat Malathat though, because I think she's coming with it.
Yeah. One key factor about Society, she's 8 of 8 in this race, which is say that she's in the 8 hole. She was a 9 of 9, 9-hole in the cotillion, and she got over. And there is nobody going to outrun her early if Florent Giroux basically lets her run out of there. And I know that maybe your fear, as we look at her in the dark, is that maybe he don't take too much hold of her now. Don't slow it down.
No.
Let her run out of there. Utilize your best weapon. I don't want to see any 48 and 3s here, because that's going to suck the others behind you. And you don't want to. You want to win this race maybe at the 5/16 pole when you open up, and then keep on going. And that's how she won the cotillion. Right. They didn't guzzle her back. They let her run. So I hope they do the same thing here.
It's not how fast you go, it's how you go fast, they say. That's trainer speak, but it's basically, if she's going 47 and she's clear on the front and nobody's challenging her, that's what you want. That would be fast. If she's going 48 and everybody's kind of into the mix and it's hard work, you're going slower, but to what end and what result? I agree. Go 47 flat, something like that for this mile and an eighth. If she runs 47 flat, she'll be too clear of the rest going down the backstretch, and that's where she wants to be. I think then she's going to get bold, turning for home. We'll see how it turns out, because she better bring the lunch pail in the stretch, because you know Malafat, she's coming. She's coming.
6-1. Now we've talked a lot about her at 6-1. We're not talking about some 8-5 shot here. So. Yeah, definitely. If you fear, the Pletcher Fillies, okay, I get it, but you better have her at 6-1 on your ticket somewhere.
Let's pivot to the Breeders' Cup Turf as our final handicapping destination for this week's podcast on the first call. We're talking fillies. We're talking great fillies in the Distaff. We've got a great filly running in the Breeders' Cup Turf this year from the U.S. She's Warlike Goddess. She beat the boys last out. Let's take you back to take a look at that.
And now Warlike Goddess begins to pick it up from third. She's moving up on the outside. Adamo is down at the rail in fourth. Then Rock Emperor, Soldier Rising. Gufo is the trailer. The field is in the stretch. Here is Warlike Goddess coming up to challenge Astronaut and Bye Bye Melvin. Soldier Rising advances down at the rail. And then it is Rock Emperor. And the field is coming to the finish here with Warlike Goddess. And she's going to beat the boys today in this Grade 1 Joe Hirsch Turf Classic. And she won it by 3 lengths.
Jeff, we talked when we were talking about the filly and Mare Turf division, how the mile and 3/16 shorter distance was really the attraction. That was the sticky paper for putting in Italian in there to go longer. It's also the reason why Warlike Goddess is in the turf now, because that mile and 3/16, frankly, just too short and sharp for her. So Bill Mott said all along he wanted the mile and a half. That's why they went to the Joe Hirsch Turf Classic to stay at that trip. Now they come back in the Breeders' Cup Turf. Mott's won this race a couple times, but it was many sunsets ago back in the 80s and early 90s. So he knows what it takes to win this race, and she's a good one. I thought she was going to win at Del Mar last year, and I'm not one to bash rides or jocks, but I think with any ride at all, she won the Filly and Mare Turf last year. She was the best horse in that race. Can she win the turf now against the boys going a little farther?
Well, you're not one to bash riders. That's not my issue. I'll bash them all I want, And she moved way too soon in that race. But maybe Julien Leperoux, who rode her last year, was concerned that maybe she didn't have the real European type turn of foot, and maybe thought that it would be better, especially with a short stretch at Del Mar, to get her in gear a little earlier. And maybe it was a little too early because she struck the front and then got out kicked. And you look at Warlike Goddess's form, and she's won 9 out of 12, maybe just as important. She's a perfect 2 for 2 at Keeneland. And she just did beat the boys, although I'm not sure that beating Bye Bye Melvin makes you as good as some of the Euros that she's going to have to face. So she's probably going to have to step it up. That saying, I think she's one of 3 that can win this race. The one that I prefer is Rebels Romance. And Charles Appleby, is done so well with these Euro shippers. You've got the stats, which you will let us know in a minute. The weird thing about this horse, Jeremy, and I didn't even realize this until just a week or 2 ago. This is a horse that had run on dirt and all weather all of his career, even though he's a son of Dubaoui. And then all of a sudden, because he was so stale on the dirt, that Charles finally got around to saying, let's try him on the grass. Well, since then, he's a perfect 4 for 4. All of those wins were group wins, the last 2 group 1s, most recently beating the German Derby winner in Germany, doing it with time form ratings that are very comparable to Yabir's time form ratings going into the race last year. And as a horse that's won 8 out of 11 with no seconds or thirds, it tells me that when the pressure is turned on, Rebels Romance finds a way. He also is not a deep closer. He can close, obviously, and he doesn't go to the front. But you can place him wherever you want him. And in the 5-hole, I can just imagine him just settling in, saving ground, just biding his time and then grinding away. He's more of a grinder than he is an accelerator.
Yeah.
But he's a good horse. He is a good horse. In fact, he was supposed to run in the Kentucky Derby last year and he got hurt. But that's how much they thought of him as a dirt horse, and he's better on grass. So, and then Godolphin's other horse, Jeremy, is Nation's Pride. Now, when Nation's Pride just won the Jockey Club Derby Invitational at Aqueduct, and that was mid-September, they asked Appleby, "Are you coming back for the Breeders' Cup?" And at that time, he said no. He says, "Well, he's a 3-year-old. We'll come back next year, but not. He's done enough here. He's been here. He's had 3 races here. We'll put him away."
Right.
And now he's in the race. Now, what does that tell you? It tells me they might say, why not run him? And the horse is doing great,
$4 million.
Exactly. I mean, we have the other horse in the race, but I don't think Godolphin cares that much which one they win with. I mean, they're both, well, actually, they'd probably prefer to win with Nation's Pride because he's a colt and the other one's a gelding. But the bottom line is he's here because this is a positive afterthought. He's here because he gave Charles Appleby every reason to believe that he belongs. So I think you got the 2 Godolphins. You've got Warlike Goddess, who is just too much race mare for me to say that she couldn't win.
Yeah.
I think that's it for me.
I'm torn on Mishriff. He's earned what, 12, 13, $14 million. Last year probably would have been favored in this race. I'm trying to think who was in the turf last year. Yabir won it, but who would have been the favorite for last year's turf? I don't know if anybody would have been bet harder than Mishriff. Now he's kind of, I don't know, is this sunset? It's the final race of his career. It's Gosden bringing him over. Is this just kind of like a let's let the fans see him kind of thing? Or are they actually here to win this sucker? I mean, if he flashes back to his good self, he beats these, right?
Well, that's true. I remember watching him run overseas on dirt. It was the Saudi Cup. Yeah, that's what it was. Charlatan, who was incredibly good racehorse for Bob Baffert, and he made the lead. And I was just, the race is over. Yeah, and Mishriff ran by him like he was standing still. And I'm saying, not only is that a Breeders' Cup horse, that is a Breeders' Cup Classic type horse because that's dirt, And he still ran some very good races. He won the John Banner National later in the year. And I said, okay, he's back in form. He can run on the dirt. He can run on the turf. Doesn't matter. Here is a Breeders' Cup horse. And they didn't bring him over. They said, well, we're going to wait till next year. I'm thinking, why wait till next year? He's never going to be as good now then as he is now, I don't think. Well, that was last year. And if he'd come over, I'd have been all over him. This year, he's got 6 starts. He hasn't won. And his last race in the Arc was poor. Okay, it was soft ground. I don't. To me, this is, if he bounces back off his recent form and makes his only win of 2022 in this race, then I tip my hat to him, but I'm not gambling on him. You can if you want, but I'm drawing the line.
This is like bringing Pete Rose back at like 43 for a pinch hit in the bottom of the ninth. Can he still do it one more time? I'd like to see it with Mishriff. We'll find out. Well, hopefully we had more hits today than the Phillies had last night, Jeff. Things didn't go too well. It's
only one loss.
That's right. It only counts as one loss. The first hit tonight will break that no-hit streak. Congrats to the Astros fans who enjoyed last night's game. We're going to get set for handicapping and playing the races at Express Bet and First Bet this weekend. Be sure to check out the Express Bet news section and the blog section, and also news.first.com for all of our updated stuff, as well as the wager guide. I really want you to check out the online digital wager guide. So many people put a lot of hard work into it. Here's the address for the wager guide, first.com/guide. Go check it out. Thanks to our web people, Nate Harvey, our graphics man, Jason Allen. Guys really did a good job putting that together on the tech end, and of all of our contributors, almost 20 handicappers taking part in the Express Bet and First Bet Wager Guide, and more late updates to come there. So make sure you keep checking back. We'll be putting more information into it, including this podcast. We're going to embed that in the Wager Guide as well. So if you want to check that out in an easy place to find it, it'll be in the Wager Guide here in the next 48 hours. It's Breeders' Cup time, Jeff. Great job handicapping. For the first time ever, I think we topped the hour mark. We're at an hour and 4, and it seems like we still could keep going. We didn't even do 6 of the races.
I can keep going. And for those of you who want my entire Breeders' Cup 14 race analysis, you can get that at expressbet.com and my blog, also xptv.com and at sananita.com. And I'll have written analysis and wagering strategies for all of those races. And not to be outdone, believe it or not, I will have the entire cards at Santa Anita Friday and Saturday as well, because 10-to-1 shots are good no matter where you can find them. So check that out. Again, it's free as always. xptv.com, expressbet.com, and my blogs, santanita.com. I'll have all 14 races all written up. And guess what? I'm going to spend the next 2 days writing them up, because I got a lot of work to do, as you do, Jeremy, as well. And hopefully, we'll cover the other races that we didn't have time to cover in this one.
I had a fleeting thought the other day of, I wonder how many words I've typed about this year's Breeders' Cup in the last week. And then I thought, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. Hey, a couple quick notes about racing around the first family of tracks. Santa Anita's closing day for the meet, for the September meet, is on Sunday. Mandatory payout in the Rainbow Six, over $300,000 in the carryover already coming into the weekend. So a mandatory payout. Everything's got to go on Sunday at the end of the meet. And also let you know that Laurel Park will begin its Monday racing for the next several weeks in November. That begins this Monday, right after Breeders' Cup. Remington Park, my old stomping grounds, my alma mater there in Oklahoma City, also takes on Monday racing starting this week. So after Breeders' Cup, we've got one of the better Monday cards that you're going to see all year long, with Laurel and Remington jumping into that Monday schedule as well. So by the time we talk to you next on Tuesday for its official Breeders' Cups, 14 races will be in the books, and Jeff and I have got to figure out 5 hot topics to talk about. Should be pretty easy to come up with them.
We'll find 5, I'm pretty sure.
On behalf of my partner, Jeff Siegel, I'm Jeremy Plonk. Good luck at the Breeders' Cup, and be sure to check out the Wager Guide.